The Kent School District Board meetings are held in public on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month at 7 p.m. at the Administration Center in accordance to the Washington State Open Public Meetings Act. Regular meetings include presentations and reports dealing with district operations, as well as time set aside for public comment. Now, here are your Kent School District Board of Directors. Welcome to tonight's board meeting.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I have invited Mr. Timothy Pickett to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Good evening. This is a meeting of the board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We allow opportunity for public comments later in the agenda. If you would like to address the board, please fill out a blue card, this white card with a blue border in the back, and bring it to the dais. If you wish to speak to an agenda item, please indicate on the card and your name will be called at that portion of the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Dr. Watts, are there any changes to the agenda?
Good evening, President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Ms. Halley. There are no changes that we made to the agenda this evening.
Okay, so we're going to begin. We're going to start with 3.0 presentations and talk about our school discipline report. I am calling Mr. Israel Villa and Randy Heath to present information and answer any questions from the board.
President Van Dosselman, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Karen, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity for our safety services and student family support services to give this report. Just to start, I wanted to share with you, we are embarking upon sharing with you on a quarterly basis the reports. You will still be getting some of the constant reports on a monthly basis for safety services. Today's that first quarterly, and we are happy to share now we have year-end data, so we'll be hearing from both Randy and Tim in those areas. But I just wanted to preface that before we start today. So thank you again.
Good evening, President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Halley. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? Okay, here's the objective of tonight's annual discipline report. We're going to provide overall trend data for the last 3 years, like we have for the last few years. Highlight progresses in areas in need of continued growth, and identify steps for implementation to systematically address student behavior. We're going to start by looking at our exclusionary discipline from an overview as a whole district. I do want to remind you on this slide that emergency expulsions are now having to be converted into something else. So, when you're looking at that, you shouldn't necessarily look at that as a separate. It is actually reflected in some of the other suspensions that are listed there because it was converted into one of those. You will see that over the last 3 years, we have had a 29% reduction of where we were 3 years ago in our short-term suspensions, and a 62.5% reduction in our long-term suspensions. Okay, this is first looking at our in-school suspensions. You can see this is broken down by race categories. On this slide, I want to point out that the table that you were looking at the bottom of the slide is our demographic information around race for the last 3 years. So you can see how the district's trend may have changed around there as the makeup. So So when you're looking at the numbers and trying to kind of look at the disproportionality that might exist, then those demographic numbers will help you to try to determine if there's a disproportionality. Okay, so once again, exclusionary discipline is when out-of-school suspension. So we're looking first at short-term suspension by race. And we can see that there continues to be a downward trend in pretty much all racial categories over the last 3 years at all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school.
Randy?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you something?
Sure.
I noticed that the Hispanic Latino numbers are up in the high school, and there was another place where they were up too, and it's just elementary school too. I was wondering if we've noticed that, or we're looking at that specifically, or?
Right, our overall Hispanic Latino population has increased, but not as much as would indicate here. So it is something that if it turns to be more than a 1-year trend, we would probably want to continue to look closely at. Okay, this is our long-term suspensions. Once again, represents lower in almost all categories. Of course, we've had a huge drop from 3 years ago, and actually if we were to compare this from 5 years ago, it's even a more significant drop in long-term suspensions. When we look later at the different categories that students are being suspended for, you will see that long-term suspensions by and large are only being implemented for those most serious of offenses, those involving some serious violent, physical violence, weapons, and some drug and alcohol. But when you're looking at long-term suspensions of those linked for drug and alcohol, it's usually around either selling or distribution of drugs and alcohol, not necessarily for possession. This is another look, breakdown by demographics other than race. We'd like to look at both gender, ELL status, special education status, and free and reduced lunch rates. Once again, the table at the bottom represents our three-year trend view of the demographics of what population of the district enrollment is made up of each of those categories. Once again, you will see a general downward trend of suspensions going down for all of those categories, like we've seen in the other ones. This one, this slide indicates those suspensions that are labeled as other. There are state-specific categories that we must, first off, we need to report all suspensions to the state. That is automatically pulled out of our student management system. There are specific categories in which the state collects data, things around fighting and drugs and weapons and a number of categories. Anything that is not a state reportable category, that is one that the districts themselves have kind of decided needed to be a category, when we suspend for those, they're reported as other. So this has also gone way down. We have very few offenses that are not state offenses that are resulting in suspensions for our students these days, which was not the case necessarily a few years ago, and even more, say, 4 or 5 years ago. This is the breakdown of the specific categories in which students are receiving in-school, short-term, long-term, and emergency expulsions. You can see once again by looking at those categories that we've done some work around really being very clear with administrators around appropriate standard sanctions as far as corrective actions that they take, which categories really should not result in a short-term suspension or a long-term suspension, and categories like where we used to see out-of-school suspensions for things like truancy, we are not seeing those anymore. And the suspension, especially long-term ones, are reserved for those most serious of offenses. category, this slide takes a little bit of an explanation to understand, but it is meant to show the frequency in which students receive multiple suspensions, the same students receiving multiple suspensions. For example, let's look at the Hispanic Latino slide, which is the second one down. This last year we had 6,176 Latino students, which represents roughly 22.44% of the district. 3.48% of our Hispanic Latino students have at least one out-of-school suspension, and of those students, each one averages 1.57 suspensions. So when you're looking at in terms of the length of the bar and the color of the bar, the longer the bar represents the percentage of the race with at least one suspension, and the darker the bar indicates the more per incident number of incidents per student of that race that was suspended. So it does indicate, this slide helps us to indicate where some disproportionality exists. And when I speak of disproportionality, just for everyone to make clear, a perfectly proportional data set would be that, say, if, like we said, if 22.4% of our students are Hispanic Latino, then 22.4% of the suspensions should be of students that are Hispanic Latino. And so that would represent a perfectly proportional data set. So you can see whenever it deviates from that, that's when we start to pay attention to it. So there's been a lot of signs of progress over the years regarding the suspensions. We're excluding less students from school than we have in years. There's a positive trend in short-term and long-term suspensions. All racial categories have seen decreases in out-of-school suspensions. Students that are designated free and reduced lunch and English language learners have shown decreases in their overall, they've closed the gap between those that are non-free and reduced lunch and non-English language learners. There's a significant decrease in the number of students suspended in the other category, as we pointed out earlier. Greater consistency in reporting of discipline data. And then we've a greater commitment to proactive strategies, as we've done some things to look at other ways to suspend. People have been very open. We've had administrators, we've had counselors, we've had teachers that are looking at things in a different way. They're looking at the behaviors that we're seeing and really looking at what are the functions of those behaviors, and let's create a corrective action that looks to try to deal with the behavior itself. And then also, let's look at some strategies we can teach the students so that maybe next time when they're faced with maybe making the same choices, they've got other strategies they can use to probably make some different decisions. So we're really trying to take a proactive look at this. However, we still have need for continued growth. The number of students suspended is still too high. We would like to continue to see that trend of it going down. While out-of-school suspension rates have decreased for all groups of students, disproportionality is still prevalent. Our African American population, which represents about just under 12% of our population, represents 35% of our suspensions, and that's a plus 23.3%. And that is, of our race categories, that is the only one that is so far out of proportion. Our Hispanic population is a plus 2, and our multiracial is a plus 2.4, which is kind of within the realm of the 3% standard deviation. And so that's not as concerning, although we need to continue to watch it. The other ones are below what their percentages are. Males continue to be suspended at a much higher rate than our female students, at a 24.2% higher. Our special education students also are suspended at a higher rate, 14 less than 0.9, and our free and reduced lunch students are as well. So, and then we continue to need the continued growth for collaboration, or calibration of this, so that we're trying, so we can better ensure that similar things are happening across our district in terms of discipline. So if a student violates a school rule at one school in our district, the corrective action and the response to that student should be similar at every school in our district, so that there shouldn't be radical differences there. And so that just takes more concentrated work with administrators around issues of working together, collaborating, looking at scenarios together, discussing how they would handle a situation, and then making sure that similar things are happening. We're doing a lot of proactive strategies to try to continue to keep the suspension rate going down. We are monitoring consistency in reporting, response, and supports. We are looking at the data monthly at the district level, and have really encouraged and given the tools to principals to look at their data monthly to try to see if they're trending away from where they've been in the past. We've revised our discipline policies and procedures, which we brought to the board last spring with a community group, community members, parents, students, staff, all came together to really look and take a hard look at some of the policies and procedures that we have. And in fact, we deviated from model policy from WASDA in a couple spots, because we felt when looking through things with a racial equity tool lens that there was certain categories that were more out of whack in terms of the things and really needed to be stronger language. An example of that would be our repeated defiance category, in that we defined it very clearly that issues such as dress code and academic, refusing to perform academically was not considered a defiance issue, that refusing to do an assignment is an academic engagement issue. It is not necessarily a defiance issue that should result in a discipline finding. And so these are the types of things that the group felt strongly about and wanted to put into language in our procedures so that we can start making some changes. We've created a 5-year district implementation plan for multi-tiered systems of support for behavior, which includes individual school coaching and supports, common professional development on functions of behavior, and implementing behavior plans. What we have discovered through different means of assessments that we need to increase the knowledge of our staff around why students maybe do the behaviors that they're doing. And, is it peer attention? Is it adult attention? Is it work avoidance? Because depending on what the functions of the behavior are, then the approach to the corrective action must be different. So we're trying to build up that knowledge among our staff. We're bringing consistency in teaching social emotional skill development at all levels. We made a commitment the last few years to really make sure that social emotional learning is happening at all of our elementary schools by making sure that the materials that the teachers needed to teach them were in their hands and were happening. So I'm happy to report that we're much further along than we were 3 years ago, and the consistency of it being taught in every school and every classroom at the elementary level. This year, a couple of our middle schools are piloting the new middle school curriculum that just came out to see from Second Step our cell curriculum. And then, the high school a couple of our high schools continue to look at School Connect, which is a social emotional program for high school, and Kentwood and Kent Meridian are using that to some degree. And then we have technical support for schools when we have people that we can send out to schools to help with them to determine what the functions of the behavior are and help them to write behavior plans. And so all of these things are positive, proactive strategies that we're trying to take. We're introducing and implementing restorative practices. Recently, our middle schools all received a Best Starts for Kids grant that will allow us to do greater training and consistency at all middle schools around instituting restorative practices. And then providing that, the money from that should be able to also provide in-school coaching for the people. Once they've received the training, then the consultant coaching will go back to the building as they're trying to implement restorative practices and giving them real-time feedback on how it's going. So we're very excited about that piece. We have in our second year of implementing our school-based mental health model that we are trying to continue to expand each year, our partnership with Valley Cities Mental Health. We continue to use early warning indicator systems to identify kids in terms of attendance, behavior, and credits, and try to catch them early and intervene and give supports so that they can be successful. We built awareness and education and training of staff. One thing I had meant to put on here and I forgot, and it was reminded today when I was sitting in a meeting with our union partners, is one of the training that I would highlight is the culturally responsive classroom management that the KEA has gotten a grant for to train teachers. I think that is a very promising practice and will help tremendously in addressing some of these concerns. And then strengthening family and community partnerships. When we have strong partnerships with our families, then they are more likely to help support us when challenging behaviors result, and we can't discount that. And our community partnerships are important as well, because as we engage in our multi-tiered systems of support, we rely heavily at the Tier 3 level on community partners, our mental health partners, our drug and alcohol partners, our restorative practices partners, our mentoring partners. These are all crucial elements when we get to a level where kids need Tier 3 really intensive supports. So we continue to work hard to build up those partnerships. Questions?
Randy, on the middle school sort of practices, who's being trained? Is it just counselors? Is it cadre teachers? Who's being trained?
Right. The plan is still being put together, and we'll be putting an RFP out for somebody to do this work. But what we're envisioning is administrators, counselors, deans of students, possibly our safety officers at the secondary level, obviously our middle school level, and possibly some teacher leaders if we can figure a way to do that. We figure the more people who have that skill, the better off we will be.
Right. That's all I've got for right now.
Great work. Thank you very much to you and the staff. My question was about WASDA and the model policy. So
Yeah.
have we provided that feedback to them, or can we go ahead and do that after WASDA? We can share how we wanted the policy to look different.
Certainly we can, and I think there's some other opportunities for WASDA support. We can certainly share that with them ASAP. Yesterday would have been better.
Because I think other districts might appreciate that, or knowing that, or taking a look at theirs with those kinds of considerations.
Absolutely. But we'll make sure to make the necessary adjustments.
So my question was in regards to, if we go to the slide that's got all the different actions like truancy, compliance, all that. I appreciate the fact, I appreciate the fact that the numbers are going down, but I still see that the highest numbers are obviously in disruptive behavior, defiance, and fighting with no injuries. Even in 2000, there's a dip, but not a whole lot of dip. Should we, I'm sure we've looked at, if we're seeing that at a certain level, or if we've done any work on, so if we're noticing a high at a middle school level, are we putting things in place at an elementary school that might be helping to help with that when students get into middle school or high school? Those numbers still just seem super high to me on some of those. And I know we've adjusted things in our policy that we talked about, so I'm just wondering what other things are putting in place.
Yeah, those numbers actually were a big influence to the committee that was looking at revising the policies and procedures on discipline, especially in the categories of disruptive behavior and defiance, because there was provides no definition for disruptive behavior. So we had to create one as a committee because we felt that was important. And the finance, like I said, we revised it. So these numbers very much influenced that committee. We started by looking at our data before we even started diving into looking at the policies and procedures. As far as the fighting goes, yes, some of the things around the social emotional work that we've been doing at the elementary level, we are hoping when we teach kids strategies about how to calm down, how to problem solve, those types of things. And then when we make sure that our staff understands that as well, not just the teachers that are teaching in the classroom, but also like the people that are monitoring recess and in the office and that type of stuff. Because one of the keys is when a kid is kind of worked up and their brain has flipped, as you know, the fight or flight type things, they often need to be reminded that they have a strategy. So the more adults who see that kind of happening with a student and their brain flipping and being able to say, hey, remember, Johnny, you have a strategy for this, use your strategy to belly breathe, use your strategy to do this, then it activates, oh, I do have that strategy, and they can use that strategy. But it's really, we need to make sure that all the adults in our building know what's being taught to the kids so they can reinforce it.
Randy, I just wondered if we had talked about this previously. Did we include our previous committee from the discipline committee? Are they part of this, or?
The one from like 3 years ago? Yeah. No, we formed a new group with who we were here. One of the things, I started gathering names of parents, kind of remember, a lot of the discipline concerns and appeals and different things come my way. And when parents have shown a passion around some of this work, I tend to try to plant a seed in their brain about, well, we have an ad hoc committee that comes in and looks at this every year. And it looks like you feel strongly about this issue. It's something that you would like to be a part of, coming in and being a part of. And so I was able to get a couple people through that method. And then, of course, this year I would like to say we were more successful in getting a student onto the committee. We got a high school one that showed up that one time when we couldn't get. High school kids are busy in the spring, so I actually took some of the work that the committee had done and went out and found some students out in the schools and gathered. Some teachers were nice enough to lend me their classroom while I reviewed a couple of things, especially around defiance and disruptive behavior with them, and asked their opinions about that. So when you can't get it one way, you go looking for a different way.
I do understand that time commitment. I think my suggestion is that we involve our families in a lot of these committees.
Right.
And they go away and we change things around, but we don't inform them of what's transpired. So I would suggest, that some way we reach out to the former committee and let them know what is happening now.
Right.
So that at least they have some room for input. But that being said, the only other comment I had was if we could start separating out that bottom block, where we talk about the different suspensions by race. We're breaking it out in its totality for the different groups. And I'm wondering if we can separate it out by the actual activity instead of grouping, everybody into one. For the 2016-17, we were saying 22.4% of Hispanic Latino students.
Mm-hmm.
Can we start breaking it down by the activity rather than, all suspensions?
Oh, are you saying this one?
No, the blue box at the bottom.
Right.
That's the total of, that's 100% of.
So you'd like to see what percent?
Yeah, for our school suspensions.
Oh, okay, all right.
It'll help us, I think, understand, what the variances.
Okay.
16, 17 did. The bottom line, just to be clear, those are our rates, student groups, demographics, percentage for the entire district. There are some determined disproportionate to the on one slide, just a question for our own education, need for continued growth. Currently, the numbers that support disproportionality, are these numbers based on unique individual students, or is it, as I'm looking at this, if I'm African-American male who also qualifies for free reduced price lunch meal, am I one individual who could also populate those three categories by myself?
Yes, I mean, yes, you conceivably could be in all four of those categories right there, yes.
Thank you very much, Director Heath. We'll move on to 2.02, Safety Services Quarterly Report. And I will call on Mr. Estrella and Officer Kovich to present information and answer questions.
Good evening, President Finkelbaum, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Allen. The presentation you see before you is part of a closure of June of 2017. The information is showing some of the highlights as we hit like graduation, closing up the positives, sending our kids home for the summer. The trend data that you see is similar to all of the monthly reports that you've already received in the past. We go back 3 months reviewing the data in these 6 major categories. The first slide was females involved in those categories. The second slide is representing males in these categories. And then the third slide here is all in these categories. So as you're noticing, you're seeing in some there's pretty much a flat line in a 3-month period. There's a few, one up or 2 up or 1 or 2 down. There's not much difference in the categories. This is broken down by race in all of the same categories, again, looking back over the 3 months from June backwards. And the bottom sections represent the actual locations with those incidents in those previous charts. The annual comparison, looking back at June 2016 from June 2017, again, is pretty even by 1 or 2 incidents in those categories. And then annually by race, there is some change there from 2016 to 17 in a few of them that you see a pretty significant decrease, and then we also do have an increase. The summary sections, if you have any questions specific, you can pause there.
But it wasn't summary. Should I wait?
I can move on and we can hit the end real quick. We have a few things that are a little different for the closure of the year than we typically do in our report. So I'll jump to those first. As we get to the end, as we're moving through the summaries, we also had all of our officers wrapping up their mentoring reports, which was great to see them do that. And then you're going to notice a slide, a little section of a slide here that represents all of our emergency drills reporting for the entire year. I'm very happy to say, not only for state requirements, but our additional requirements we put on in the Kent School District, we are at 100% for all sites, completing all drills, which is quite a task. Very happy about that. And along with that, again, it's those added ones we do here in the Kent School District because we want to try and do more with the students and the staff for training, and they met all those. So kudos to all the staff out there and the kids, so that was great. We don't stop after June, so we wrap up a little bit of the activities going on over the summer. So we have a small kind of a skeleton crew here in the summer, but we still are out there with summer schools. We're doing proactive firework patrols, working with our partners in the city of Kent, which has been a huge, huge help. They go out there and work with us and address all of the issues specifically to our schools, and this was a new year with the law changing, no tolerance. And we had some ongoing projects with Access ID, ongoing camera projects going on out in schools, working on, I believe it's the 2013 reallocation of funds to do those security enhancements out there at our schools, keep our kids safe. And we continue with some staff trainings. We bring our staff back, getting ready for this school year, and we do an academy, a training academy. And so we did that for 8 days, and we had a great response to that, working with Randy Keith in some of his proactive restorative practices, some other things. So that was really great work. And this is relatively new, closing out the year. This is total counts in all of our categories, and our categories of use of force. So there was a total of 23 use of force last school year total. Some of those use of force are actually law enforcement and not safety officer, but we track if that does occur on our school grounds. Same with use of restraints, which is the category in orange. We had a total of 25. Same scenario if a police officer was there working with us and to determine an arrest was necessary. Sometimes the officer did that, but we assisted, but we still report that. Staff assaults that safety officers were either reported to or were involved in was accounted for. There are others that do occur that safety officers were not involved in, so that report didn't come through our office. So that's why it's not represented there. Student assaults, 52. That number is pretty high overall. But again, that represents a student walking past another student and striking them for an unknown reason. It was an unwanted touch, basically, by definition. Gang related, that's the small 4 there. Almost all of those, I believe, but one is graffiti found in a bathroom with no suspects. So that's still categorized that way by the nature of what it is. And then total count on drug and alcohol was 117 that the officers were involved in. And that would close the report.
I think we've asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again. On the drug and alcohol, are you seeing a difference in the amount of marijuana being used over the times as it's become legal for adults to use it?
It's very, very consistent in about a 5-year trend. We recently did this overall. The numbers do not change by very much as a year total. We do see changes in a month here to a month there. And when we do a comparison, we've seen, well, in 1 month there was 8, and this month there was 19. Sometimes that is weather and not wanting to be in school, and that truancy piece is big, and keeping kids in school and away from those other activities. It's sometimes as simple as that. But a lot of it's anecdotal. I mean, us walking around and doing different things, we haven't seen much change though.
Under the staffing and training, remind me, because it says we have a new school resource officer at Kent Lake High School, and I was thinking that was like a new position versus a replacement, but I couldn't remember.
It is our officer who was there, Carl Bunnell. last year on contract. He went to the city of Maple Valley, to their new high school over there. So we're refilling that existing position. So Jenna Wilson is our new officer from King County.
So on the training, can you speak just a little bit about the WASO annual training conference that you went to? What things you learned there that were different that you're implementing here?
So the WSSO, the Washington Safety,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Yeah, so it's all of the groups from all of the schools that have safety or security or school resource officers in the state of Washington all get together for an annual training academy. I did not go. We had 2 officers that were instructors actually, which is why we were able to send them. They were paid for to be able to go. And one of them was on, those officers worked on event planning and safety and security, much like how would you plan for French Field and events and situations that might occur there, proper staffing, working with law enforcement, emergency responders, all of that. That's an ongoing theme that we're trying to work on in our schools, not only when we do our lockdown drills in our schools. We typically think of only in the school day, but we're trying to expand that to those tricky times, the start of the school, lunches, a performance in the arts center, or at a basketball game. What would that look like? And we're trying to now work with schools in tabletop exercises to do that planning and try and get all of those staff on board. That's one of the big themes that we were working on there just as a topic. So.
Yes, I only have one question, and I mentioned it to Dr. Watts. It's just been percolating of late. Is there anything we're doing to ensure safety that's different, given what is happening with, at our games with the take a knee stands that students may be opting to do? Are we doing anything?
We are not as safety officers. I mean, we are aware of that going on and in other places. I know athletics is working with teams and other things for support in different direction. But for us, we are aware. Our concern of does that cause angst or other things with fans or things like that. And that's a normal response that we're always trying to prepare for. So just discussing these situations and just being able to have the ability to protect the kids, protect the families, and so that's an ongoing discussion.
Okay, thank you. And then on a positive side, I saw the Covington Police is working with the Student of the Year. And is that something that is going to?
We hope that can continue. Yes, so our school resource officer, Karen Davey, and Chief McCurdy from Covington, they're doing, a Student of the Year piece with a couple of the schools, and they're going to schools and doing presentations for all the positive things that student has done. And yes, they are continuing that, and a whole laundry list, so to speak, of other great programs, some gang awareness pieces, badge and barbells, getting to work with the kids in after-school programming, so pretty encouraging.
Thank you so much for all you do, and it's really wonderful to hear what all our officers do.
Thank you.
Next up is 3.0 Board of Directors Informational, and it is the capital project status update, and Mr. Mike Newman will be available to answer questions.
Oh, I had a question. I really appreciated the update on the projects, and what I wanted to know was how we're communicating to voters and our public about our status on these projects. I'm wondering, are we going to be updating the website that has the bond information?
Timely that you would ask that question. So Dr. Decker and Mr. Loftuson, his team and I are working on what we can put together for an update. This provides information here as we look at the active projects of those that are currently underway. If you haven't been by the project, our new Covington Elementary, it is now coming up out of the ground. It's not very glamorous when they're doing all of the electrical and plumbing work and foundation work, but now you're able to start seeing the walls coming up in different areas, so that's really exciting. And Mr. Dave Buzzard, who is our project manager, is doing a fantastic job with all of these different projects. So we will be putting these up on the website, updating the website. Those that are listed in the active status are ones that have gone through the planning and permitting processes. We are actually opening bids again on the multi-purpose rooms at Grass Lake and Park Orchard this week, and the other projects, their timelines are listed on there. When we have projects in the planning stage, that means that they are still working with architects and engineers and other designers and our staff, and that's what you see on the list up here on the screen with the 2016 bond projects. You'll also notice in the list that there is 2006 bond projects, and there are some active ones there. There are carryovers, as Mr. Kovich was saying. There are the security things that are still remaining to be done, and so we are working through those. And then you'll also notice the other capital projects that are active there that are on the list of things that were approved to go forward early last summer.
So one quick question, so on that, ones where we're doing multi-purpose rooms where they're scheduled to be the completion early 2018. So how is that working as far as, obviously we have students in those schools while that's going on? So what are we doing, or how does that look?
So we work with the building principal in figuring out safe plans of passage for students around there. Usually they're separated by some form of fencing to keep our students separated from the contractors is the normal way that that's done.
I had a related question too. I don't, this is probably really random, but I know that multi-purpose rooms are being placed in different places depending on the school layout. What's being replaced or what's being removed? Is it covered play areas? Is it part of the playground?
Each one are a little different, and Dave's been involved in some of those designs, so I'll let you speak to that, Dave.
At Grass Lake, that was going on the south side of the building. And what that will be is that that particular school will have, there are 4 schools just like that. So that particular multi-purpose room will be put exactly where it is. We've had to add some parking lot and some other things of that nature, but other than that, they'll be pretty much the same in those 4 schools. We really rely on the architect, SMA, Carlos Sierra, to come up with some nice concepts so that we can have some a little bit of a different look, but kind of the same look. You're welcome.
This is kind of a question and a comment, because capital construction and the capital budget came up obviously at WASDA since the state didn't finalize the capital budget. And so one of the WASDA proposals that was presented and voted on by the membership actually got changed from the vote on the floor. And because the wording was that we were going to advocate for funding up to 50% of projects, and based on need would be how the money would be allocated. And some of the school districts that historically are wealthier and haven't gotten any money really advocated for it being changed, and the people present it got approved to make it still be based on need, but be at least 20%, so that all schools could be considered. So then that's wanted to update you all about that and where WASDA is moving with its advocacy around the capital budget. And then my question is, so for these projects, if you could share any information, now or later, about what, how much funding have we gotten from the state to support these?
So these projects that are listed here are all projects that were approved by our community through the bond issue. So there are no state dollars tied to any of these, so they're funded locally. The Covington Replacement School project, when the legislature does approve a capital budget, will be one of those schools that will get state matching monies. And so the match really isn't anywhere close to what the total cost of the project is, but we're anticipating somewhere between $6 and $7 million in match funds that will go towards other projects in the future.
So that 6 or 7% is, the 6 or 7 million, can you say about how much percentage that is? I'm just trying to think about, what's this position on this and how it relates to what we're actually getting currently when we do get state match dollars.
So we would be probably, let's see, that's going to work out to be 12%. Is that what it is, Ralph? Okay, about 12%. So it is a small amount, but when you look at all of the projects across the state that are waiting to be funded, the new in lieu of modernization does carry more dollars towards the state match than new construction would on schools that qualify for unhoused student dollars.
Well, I guess I'll publicly thank our voters again for approving these.
We will move on to 4.0, the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Newman, Mr. David. Let's see, would anyone like to pull an agenda item?
I can send it to you. It was highly capable program.
I'd like to pull 4.06 and 4.11. We'll start with Karen. 4.05, please. Okay. You need to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 4.05, 4.06, and 4.11. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. All right, now.
I was just looking at the gifted rating scale. Who is aware of that? Who uses it?
So it's the HiCap team is using that, the gifted rating scale.
So as the students come in and
Right. We were trying to be fiscally responsible and still serve. So trying to keep costs reasonable, but also trying to maintain our kind of equity balance and our commitment to boosting diversity in our HiCap program. And so that's part of that work. And so it was partially developed looking at last year's data and making sure that we set thresholds that will allow us to identify students that can still meet the need.
how many students, I mean, I don't expect a number right now, but are there many students that self-refer?
Students do not self-refer, although legally under the law they can. So they could refer a classmate under the law. They could refer themselves under the law.
They can fully, under the
They
law.
do, they can, but that does not happen very often. Most of the time it is an adult advocate, typically the parent. Sometimes the school does, and then we go to then reach out to the parents and say, please sign the forms, please sign the forms.
And just another question, at the secondary level, besides their achievement on tests, do we have anything that, I mean, I suppose we could, when we see that they're scoring high on tests, we can say, okay, let's take a look at this gifted rating scale, whatever. I'm just concerned that, I mean, I know that there are some gifted students who don't present that way.
And I would say that Ann, Karen, Amy, and I have been looking into HiCap and service at secondary. I think we have a pretty tight plan that works very well for elementary, but we've been investigating kind of those gaps at secondary. So we know it's a need, and so that's something that we're trying to build support, and that actually they paid special attention this year in the budget plan for that. So supporting secondary HiCap.
And as far as at elementary, do we still have a well-functioning cluster set up for students?
So Director DeBruler, when you add clarifying statements like well-functioning, I would say high-functioning, yes. Well-functioning is always debatable depending on where you are. I think we try very hard to support our students in a cluster model. Some of that is dependent upon what staffing looks like in a building, what class size looks like in all of those structures, but we try to support that service model.
I know what I got to see several years ago, and I just wonder how it's, if people still being trained, people.
Yes, so even in the midst of where we are with budget, we are still planning and supporting PD for our high cap staff.
So my question was about House Bill 2242 that changed the funding formula and that equitable identification priorities, it says. So I'm wondering, do we know yet what the impact of those changes are, and do we feel like that's going to work well for our students, or is that an area of advocacy that we would want to ask our legislators to consider changing again if they're making changes to education funding?
So there's never not a need for additional funding. But I would say that under this, it served us well. I mean, we did benefit as a district from that shift. If we are going to advocate, I would say advocating for maybe some of the changes in the language of the law around identification. I think our big struggle as a district with identification and increasing diversity and access is that we can say that a teacher could identify, a student could self-identify and say, I want that challenge in access, but if we cannot access the parent and get them to agree to test, they can't even go through the process. That's not even about service. Then we have to go back again and get permission to serve. So we don't, not that we want opportunities to do things with students and not inform their parents, but we can't even say that your child took the test and is gifted and we have evidence and we want to now serve. We can't do that. So I think the advocacy is around being able to show parents the data and say, they are gifted and need that service. So how do we do that? Because I think that's the loophole, especially with some of those underserved groups. There are language challenges, there are other issues that impact whether or not they want to engage with the school district and sign off on something. So.
4.06 is professional service. Thank you, Dr. Herman. 4.06 is professional services contract for sound support. I just had a technical question. I know we're working with independent contractors, and I noticed that in the section where we're requesting independent contractor details, if we're asking for business license number, are we? I know we're asking for federal tax ID, but I think if they gross more than, I think it's 12,000 a year, we have to get the UBI number. So I didn't see that in the agreement.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to the process for contract. This is directly linked to what Randy Heath shared on the TSSB implementation. Is a contract. We have not, we wanted to start here. We have not determined exactly what those supports will be. We broke them out as you saw, professional development, leadership development, some other pieces. But we intend to follow the appropriate contract pieces once we solidify where we're going next.
Sensitive to that, the independent
Absolutely.
contractor. So
Absolutely.
I'm hoping we're getting that information and not just the federal tax ID.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it on that.
Okay.
4.06.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Mr. Bell. And the final one is 4.11, which I'd like to rescind my request to pull. I'd like to address it later. So in which case I'd like to ask for a motion to approve 4.05, 4.06, and 4.11, please. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you, motion passes. We're now to 5.0 communication. And as a general reminder that as a board, we are here to listen to all of you. We will not be responding, and the response may come appropriately after this session, okay? So first up, I'm going to be calling the order of receipt of these cards. Once I call your name, you will be speaking to my right, the podium on the right, and you will have 3 minutes. First up is Stephanie Lawson, and then right after that is Layla Jones.
A lot of you in there already know me. I'm here to advocate for children like my son, who is in 5th grade and not reading. That's disappointing to the district. It should be very disappointing. I've just talked to another lady here who had the same similar situation. We, as parents who advocate, are involved in the school and involved, and how many of you guys know me that you know that I've advocated for my child? I've been throwing a lifeline out since kindergarten, saying, my son's not reading, I think he has dyslexia because it runs in our family. And I've been screaming, he is on life support to read. And so far, I keep getting phone calls, people tell me their job description, and no action. I need action, and any kid who is in a situation where they're not reading, Rylan is smart. He's a very smart kid. He's artistic, he has so many abilities. He's a leader in his Pep Scout pack, and we are holding him back as a leader to go with the Boy Scouts. He's a Boy Scout, as a young man that over here knows, you have to lead, and you have to be able to read to do so. The law states that he's supposed to get a free and appropriate education, according to his needs. His needs are not being met. His needs are not being met. On the 16th day of the school year, he had not been pulled out for reading for part of his IEP. 6th day of the school year. That's what the district has done to my child. My child he's very fragile medically. He's fragile emotionally too, because he's not reading in 5th grade, and all his peers are reading, and people are making fun of him. But my child has learned, because of the parent I am, to go make friends with those children, even though they're making fun of him. I need support, not just from the district, but from the state. I need you guys to look at this and put some accountability for other kids, because it's not okay for any kid. There should be some accountability. By the time he's in 1st grade and he's not reading, a parent saying, my child's dyslexic, it runs in our family. What are we doing? Nothing so far. Nothing has been done. 2nd grade, he is still reading at a kindergarten level in 2nd grade. We're still doing the same thing. We're not getting anywhere. We should have done something by that time, and we did not. I probably had over 40 IEP meetings from kindergarten to here just with that son, not including my other child. We have, the idea is in place for what reason? That law is in place for what reason? To support kids like mine and any other special needs child. Children with disabilities are supposed to receive a high quality instruction with qualified people, and so far that's not happened. Last year, Ryland's special education teacher quit in the middle of the year, and then I was told today, well, she wasn't really that great at giving the education. And that's what I was told today. So what are we doing? What are we doing with special education? Like, why is that a problem? I, as a parent, and as many other parents, feel the same way, that we depend on you to help us. We are not educators. We can read to our children every night, do math problems, do Khan Academy, all these other websites that are available to us. But if we don't have the educator support, we will get nowhere. And it's on you guys to make sure that it gets somewhere. So as a board, we need to put something in place to not let children slip through the cracks. He's in 5th grade, reading at kindergarten level.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson.
Good evening, Dr. Watts and members of the board. My name is Layla Jones. I am a kindergarten teacher at Hampton Lake Elementary School, and I wanted to come here tonight and take the opportunity to bring to your attention that there are teachers in our district that are not receiving 10-minute breaks on our late start with pay schedule. I understand that this falls under the Washington State Labor and Industries Workplace Rights Clause, and to my knowledge, that law states that employees shall be allowed a rest period of not less than 10 minutes on the employer's time in each 4 hours of working time. The rest break must be allowed no later than the end of the 3rd working hour. This is not the case in my building and possibly in other buildings in the district. Currently at my school, there's about 20 staff members that this affects. We are being made to wait 3.5 to 4 hours before you receive any type of break. And that's calculating the time from when the bell rings, not if you're on duty that morning in the hallway. So that means we're not getting breaks to go to the restroom, we're not getting breaks to get water or to take a personal phone call, none of that. So from my research, it's just really troubling for me to know that my colleagues and I do not have the same worker protection rights that anyone in a minimum wage job would receive. And I don't know if anyone here has to wait that long to go to the restroom, but it's not a good time. When I brought this issue to my principal the very first week of school, it was September 1st, I was told, and my other building rep were told, that HR at the district level had advised that the building administration did not need to give us breaks because we were salaried employees. That didn't really sit right with me, so I looked into it further. And nowhere in my research did I find in the labor laws that said anything that salaried employees were exempt. In fact, what I continued to find was that all employees, including public employees, were covered under that law. I even contacted LNI to seek further clarification because maybe I just missed it. But the person that I talked to there repeatedly assured me that we as salaried employees at a public school were covered under that law. They also let me know that if it wasn't resolved, to file a complaint with Labor and Industries, and they will investigate it further. I don't think it's beneficial for anyone involved for it to escalate to that level, but it has been 26 days since I brought this up. And when I presented my research and communicated the results in my phone calls to my principal, they again said that HR just emailed them that day, and it wasn't required, so they didn't have to do it. I'm just really left wondering what the pushback here is and why, and I am prepared to file a complaint with the state if it continues to go unresolved. So,
Thank you. Next up is Christy Padilla, and then Marley Laram.
Dr. Watts, members of the board. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about how the budget cuts have impacted teachers and the buildings. And I don't know of a forum for us to be able to do that, so I'm going to take the opportunity now to maybe allow you to hear some teacher voice in this. KDA became aware of the rapid decrease in the amount of the ending fund balance about a year and a half ago, and the district was gracious enough to meet with myself and some WA staff, and we had discussions. There was a lot of warnings from WA because that's what their job is, to watch the ending fund balance of 295 school districts. And at that time, it didn't feel like we were being taken very seriously, and a lot of our concerns were dismissed. And our WA staff person said, if you don't change the trajectory, you're going to end $7 million in the hole in August. And it didn't feel like it was really being dealt seriously, so I even had doubts in my head, is this really true? And then we became aware this summer that in fact this did come to fruition. And I appreciate the fact that we had public forums, and at that point that's when there was some time for teacher voice. But at the time we were also promised that the cuts would be kept farthest away from the classrooms as possible. And then, as it turns out, teaching positions were not filled or cut, and the supports for those teaching positions were not filled or they were cut. And not only that, but the supplies for the classroom teachers were also cut. And so, again, I don't know that our concerns about keeping cuts away from kids were necessarily taken seriously. Second week in September, around September 15th, I got emails from teachers saying there's no toilet paper in our bathrooms, there's no paper towels. It just seemed outrageous to me, and so here's where I need to reflect, because I didn't necessarily take it seriously. So my members forwarded me emails from staff in our district saying, go ask parents for toilet paper, or go ask for donations for Kleenex, go ask donations for paper towels. I also received emails, directions, do not use more than 12 inches of toilet paper, do not use more than 6 inches of paper towels, do not. So So these 5 schools that reported said they were too embarrassed to go to our public. And so as it were a member-driven organization, so when we had our meeting, we came up with the idea of a paper drive. And then as a leader now, I'm reflecting on intent versus impact, because the impact was much different than my intent. And I know it's been embarrassing, but I gotta tell you, it's been pretty embarrassing for teachers to have to go ask parents for supplies. It's been incredibly embarrassing for teachers to have to return supplies because for like science and math, they did this where they had permission, and then all of a sudden they just didn't have permission, so they had to go return them. It's been incredibly embarrassing to take a school district credit card this fall even, and have it denied after you have this huge cart of materials. So what I'm asking, and then I've heard that the district isn't going to accept any donations at all, and we're going to take it to the nearest food bank or whatever. So again, now we're back to square one where our teachers don't have supplies. So I'm asking, I'm just letting you know this is real, and I'm asking if there is a forum or a way that we could come together to make sure that our kids in our classroom.
So, ironically, I actually came tonight to hear more about the budget issue and hopefully get that addressed. I don't know that that's been addressed to my satisfaction. But I noticed HICAP was on the schedule, and I have 2 children that are HICAP identified. And I was kind of disappointed to hear that we felt we had a healthy program in elementary schools. So as a parent of 2 HICAP kids in elementary, I have a 2nd grader and a 5th grader here doing for Khan Academy. I want to give you sort of what my experience has been. In 2nd grade, we had a teacher during a conference, and when we asked specifically what they were doing to challenge our daughter, we were told, she sort of actually laughed at us, turned around, pulled down a HICAP binder, dropped it on the table and said, "I don't have time for this." That was her answer to how she was challenging our HICAP identified child. I've heard from other parents that teachers have said it's just too hard to do HICAP in grade schools. And then we have, our son is 3 weeks into school, and to give you some perspective, this is my 2nd grader who reminded me this summer when we were building a ground fire pit that I needed to use pi to calculate another bricks. He came home near tears because he was given an addition and subtraction homework book. And he addition and subtraction, and he was just really defeated. And so we've been working with the school, and the teacher has apologized, but she said they just are not getting the support and resources to deal with HICAP children outside of the Odyssey program. And that's been my experience. That's what I wanted to talk to.
Thank you very much. We'll go into 5.0, sorry, 6.0. So 5.0, Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, President Ray, Goslin, members of the board, Ms. Howie, to our staff, family, support staff, teachers, members, and friends. Tonight, I was struck by our data, specifically our data that supports teaching and learning. Specifically, glad to see that our positive trend in short-term and long-term suspensions is the trend is bending in the right direction, and all racial categories have experienced decreases. However, what I did also note is that some of our students, in terms of disproportionality, are still being sanctioned disproportionately high levels relative to their student groups. So what I know about problem solving is that we can't solve a problem, we won't be able to solve a problem if we don't identify it. I believe it's often call the thing a thing. So once we identify a problem, why we're seeing misbehaviors or students are not doing what we would want them to do, or doing something that we certainly don't want them to do. We can solve that problem once we identify it, and we can provide, tell them nothing more than to provide a safe and secure environment for our students to learn, our teachers to teach, and our support staff to support. So again, multiple realities can coexist. The numbers do show that there's a positive trend and there's still room for improvement. Which leads me to a second point of mention this evening, the work session. Dr. Sean Smith joined us earlier, those who were here, just to talk about digital conversion. The idea that there is an answer to the question that I asked years ago, what's the most impactful, important component of Kent School District that you were proud of? And what I heard more times than not was either our rich diversity or our technology. And when asking how we're utilizing that technology to improve outcomes for students, I have not seen a framework that aligns the work that's already embedded in our blueprint, from professional learning to curriculum to leadership to ensuring that our digital ecosystem is at play and balance and supports our students' needs. So while we have not engaged formally with digital conversion and the company itself, I do want us to take a look at how we can continue to be future focused in addressing the needs of our students, making sure that our teachers have the professional learning to support the needs of our students. Because now, kindergarten students who joined us this year, class of 23rd, I know by and large how I'm going to act and operate and move it I'll have in 13 years. However, are we truly preparing our students who will be graduates in 13 years in 2030? Preparing them for anything is part of our mission, success, preparing them for their futures, not just for something. So that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you very much.
I just have a couple of things. Weeks ago, I think, I attended the Southern Poverty Law Center Seattle update. The President Richard Cohen and the founder Morris Dees were there. And Southern Poverty Law Center identifies need groups, and all of them, they defend people who are unjustly charged of crimes. And there were some celebrations, but what the main thing they showed, I guess, is that there's an alarming increase in hate crimes. And we need to be, we've seen it here, and we need to be aware of that and really stay focused on putting a positive, all-accepting message from our district. This is, as a teacher, many years ago, I had a little girl in 3rd grade in my highly capable class, and after she was in 3rd grade, her family moved back to India. And I got an instant message from her this morning, and we spent several hours just going back and forth. She needed somebody for social emotional support, and she contacted me, and it's just so that teachers know how important it is that you are there for your kids. And it may not happen that year, but it could happen 13 years later. She's 21 now, she's in her last year of college. She's doing computer science, working with artificial intelligence and coding. She's got an interview with Intuit next week. And wow, I'm just very impressed with her, and I was very honored that she contacted me. As far as mentoring goes, I'm continuing mentoring my student at Emerald Park, my 3rd year with her. And I started this week with my student, my 2nd year at KPA. And I spent 3 hours today sitting with her while she was working on some lessons that she missed. She hadn't unfinished, so my brain is a little tired. but it was good work. So that's it for me.
So I wanted to provide a verbal update about the WASDA, the School Directors Association and Legislative Assembly, and I'll try to type up my notes and get those out to you all. I was so proud of our junior ROTC that led the flag procession in and led us in saluting the flag, so that was great to see them there and be able to talk to them. And I wanted to remind you to vote, if you haven't already, for the WASDA elections. That you have to do it by the end of the day Friday. If you lost your password, you can contact WASDA to get that again. And then the fall meeting, Regional 2 meeting is coming up October 19th. And I signed up for that, paid my $20 to attend. So I encourage others. I know Kevin's going to be you're out of town. And then, I wanted to put a plug in for the resolutions committee that I've been serving on for WASDA. And this was part of our conversation when we met as Region 2, because both myself and Chris Marks from the Bellevue School District, her term is also ending on her school board. So we are the 2 reps from Region 2 to the resolutions committee and won't be continuing. And we're both strong voice for our region and a voice of equity bringing to that work. And so we want to make sure at that annual conference in November, hopefully we'll be able to have some go there, and others from Region 2 to really get some strong representatives to serve on that resolutions committee to fill our spot. And I think this year is going to be particularly important for that committee because there was conversation similar to the work that the WASDA Legislative Committee did of going back and kind of revamping the proposals and figuring out what fits where better and what needs to be updated. That's probably going to be the work of the resolutions committee this year. So I want to make sure that someone's thinking as we do on that work. And then the Legislative Assembly itself, of course, the education funding and House Bill 2242 is a big topic of conversation, and I realize it's so complex and I don't know a lot about it. There was a lot of talk about the regionalization factor and the impact on districts of that. So I would like to ask if we could have a work session. I know WASDA was asking for input from districts about how they've been impacted and had real cards, and I felt like I wasn't knowledgeable enough to give input. And I want us to be voices with our legislators, before they go back in January, of what changes that we need to serve our kids better. Related to that, one of the big topics was around special education and not enough funding for our special education students and concerns. Mary Furtakis was talking from a federal perspective and sharing information about Washington State outcomes for special ed students, and one way of categorizing it, we're 50th, like the worst, for our special education students, so that was an area of concern. And then DACA, and particularly in our Region 2 committee, but also other parts of the Legislative Assembly, of really wanting to put out a strong word of support for our students that are in the DACA program. And WASDA just put out, if you haven't seen it yet, there's a standing legislative position that WASDA members we've had adopted quite a while ago around the Federal Dream Act and supported that. And so WASDA's called that out and called out some of the other districts like us that had resolutions that, like our board passed and support. So there's an effort to try to encourage other districts to do that, to put pressure on our congressional delegation to continue support for those students. And then lastly, I wanted to share that the timeline for the legislative proposals. So all of our prioritization, and thank you so much, Maya, for your input, and I thought about what the rest of us would all think and sort of gave our priorities. And so early in November should be the point at which we'll see what those priorities end up being after the legislative committee has taken the input from Legislative Assembly and presented it to the board. I did want to mention that all of our proposals that we worked on with the other districts like Tukwila and Yakima, those all passed, so that was good. And then another one I wanted to mention was the one I mentioned that Issaquah School District had put one forward that was specifically around teachers who had gotten credentialing in another country and came here, and there's not a process for them either through emergency certification or to become a teacher that really recognizes and would allow us to hire them. And so that ended up, there was an amendment to an existing position that was broader around hiring and recruiting teachers and addressing the teacher shortage. And it seemed like a great solution that there was an amendment to bring in those parts addressing internationally prepared teachers that come here, and was encompassed in this other position that was standing. So it was a good solution. So that's it on my report from last year, and I will follow up with some notes of the work.
So for the executive session, Dr. Watts, can we put lunch as under our board discussions as a standing on our agenda?
Yeah, I forgot. I wanted to thank again all of you for contributing money, and I contribute a little bit too, so that we could go and not have to use district funds for us.
So I'm very excited. I found out today that my mentee is actually, we have signed permission, so we're scheduling my first visit. So it'll be nice to have a return student again this year. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention quickly is we do still have the Kent Schools Foundation. And so we are still looking and recruiting people to help with our board on that. So if you are interested, either myself or Paul happens to be standing over in the corner there, who is our current president, I'm sure would be more than willing to talk to you about the things that we're doing. So,
I wanted to thank Adam Jones, teacher Adam Jones from Kentwood, for inviting the board to visit, and I was fortunate enough to take a day off from work and watch his students. He's an arts teacher, and just really enjoyed my time watching our special ed and our general ed students working together collaboratively in really incorporating not just arts, but that whole, we talk about STEM and arts as a separate entity, but they're all incorporated, and really thank him for the opportunity. And if anyone is able to attend, he's more than welcome to have you come in. I also wanted to thank the Kent Area Council PTA for allowing us to do a board report on a monthly basis. And one of the things when Christy, you spoke about our paper shortage, what it really made me think about was the importance of communication between and among all of us. We're all partners in this. And you know, when you said teachers are hearing that we will turn away the papers that are collected to the food bank or to the charity. You know, Dr. Watts spent quite a bit of time discussing that whole issue at the PTA meeting, and that was not at all what was shared. What was shared was that there was a concern there would be excessive pieces of paper and products that will come in now that there's a drive, and what will we do with that excessive, where will we store it? You know, it was one of those questions. So I think it's really important that we, you know, really put things in context, and I don't want to dwell on it, but I really think it's important that we as partners be able to share what we're hearing and not making assumptions on that. And then I just wanted to say that I've been hearing a lot of things about concerns out in the field. I'm talking to Dr. Watts about it, about taking the knee, and we care about all of our students, and we want all of our families and students to feel safe, so it's something that we're looking into it. And regarding our budget, we have asked, I know you didn't hear about it here, but we have asked that all of this information be on a website that is you know, transparent, and will enable you to review it without having financial skills. You'll be able to, it'll be in layman's terms. So we just want to share that, and we really thank you, and we appreciate hearing from all of you. And thank you for coming today. Okay, let's take that after the meeting. Thank you so much for attending, and have a good evening and drive carefully.